Good evening. My name is Arno Babadjanian. I'm the Director of Academic Affairs here at the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, NASR. And thank you for coming out on a kind of dismal night and spending some time with us. And I want to thank and recognize also the co-sponsors of tonight's program with NASR, the Mashtot's Chair in Armenian Studies at Harvard University, the Friends of Armenian Culture Society, FACS, and the Tekayan Cultural Association, Boston chapter, and thank you to them, and individually to Christina Maranti, Ara Arakalian, Aram Arkun, and Sosi Yogurtian for helping out and for also being here. Briefly, I would like to mention a few upcoming programs. 2 weeks from today, on Thursday, March 20th, there will be a hybrid event like this here at NASR and online with Dr. Nuné Melikian of the History Museum of Armenia. His talk will be titled Shattered Heritage, Museums, Memories, and Cultural Loss in Artsakh. And this is presented by the NASR Calouste Gulbenkian Lecture Series on Contemporary Armenian Issues and co-sponsored by the Society for Armenian Studies, the Harvard Mashtot's Chair, and the Armenian Museum of America. On Saturday, March 22nd, at noon will be the next program, webinar, in the series Literary Lights, which is organized by the International Armenian Literary Alliance, NASR, and the Krikor and Clara Zorab Information Center. And this will be the second of 2 panels featuring contributors to the special Armenian issue of Wazafiri magazine. The first one a couple of weeks ago was excellent, and this one will be as well. On Tuesday, March 25th, we're pleased to co-sponsor a talk organized and hosted by the Tekayan Cultural Association Boston, featuring our friend and colleague, Dr. Sergio Laporta, titled When Things Fall Apart, Disentangling Christian-Muslim Relations in Medieval Armenia. This will be at the Baikar Center in Watertown, an in-person event. As is a second talk of the same title by Sergio Laporta on Thursday, March 27th at the Catholic University of America in Washington. So if you are driving from Boston to Washington and you really want to hear 2 talks by Sergio Laporta, this could be your big opportunity. But at any rate, NASR is very pleased to be a co-sponsor of both of these programs. So much for March, and April will be a busy month, also including a program here at NASR on April 15th featuring Nancy Krikorian in conversation with Nanor Barsoumian discussing Nancy's brand new novel, The Burning Heart of the World. We hope you can attend some or all of these. I especially want to appeal to you to attend in-person events in person when you can. We're truly grateful to everyone who watches our programs online or in person in any way, or after the fact on YouTube. It's great, but there's something special about the interaction that takes place with actual people at in-person events, as I'm sure you will agree, or I hope you will agree. Let me remind you also that the work we do at NASR is made possible by the support of our members and our donors. Thank you for your generous support. If you're not a NASR member, please consider making this the night that you become one. And I'm certain that the same can be said for our friends at the Tekayan and at FACS, and I urge you to support these organizations as well. As a modest inducement, because the word bribe has taken on such negative connotations in some circles, we will raffle off a copy of Arno Babadjanian, An Armenian Beat in Soviet Time by Nuné Melikian, from whom we will hear momentarily. If you're already a NASR member and are here in person, we just need you to clearly sign in and provide us with your contact information. If you are a NASR member attending on Zoom, we have your contact information and we'll get in touch. And if you're watching on YouTube and you're a NASR member, send us an email and say, hey, I'd like to be part of this whole raffle thing and win a free book. And if you're not a NASR member, do I have to tell you what you need to do? Become a NASR member. It couldn't be much simpler. Now, Dr. Nuné Melikian, who is our featured speaker and artist tonight, is an acclaimed violinist, scholar, and educator. A prize winner of numerous competitions and audience awards, Nuné has performed at the Stern Auditorium and Weil Recital Hall at Carnegie Hall, Merkin Hall at Lincoln Center, and many other prestigious venues. Nuné graduated from the, how do you pronounce it? Is it Gnessen or Gnessen? is one of those. Music college, studied at the Moscow State Conservatory and holds a master's from the University of Montreal and a PhD from McGill University. Arno Babadjanian, An Armenian Beat in Soviet Time, is the first English language book on this remarkable composer, aiming to introduce his genius to a broader audience. I would also, by the way, like to recognize, because she's here, our dear friend Miriam Gargarian, whose thesis, a descriptive analysis of the Suite and 6 pictures for piano by Arno Babadjanian, was completed in 1986. Miriam? We have pretty much all the people who have done serious work in English on Arno Babadjanian here in one room tonight, so enjoy the moment. We're also happy to have with us the talented pianist Rico Higuma, who will be accompanying Dr. Melikian. So first we will be treated to some music, then you will hear the talk. Following the talk, we welcome your questions here in person and on Zoom. Use the Zoom Q&A function, and once that concludes, we will have a reception and invite you to stay, enjoy some refreshments, and buy a copy or two of Arno Babadjanian, An Armenian Beat in Soviet Time, and have it signed. That's enough from me. Let me now turn things over to Dr. Melikian. Dr. Melikian.
Mark was just telling me what was wrong with my playing. That was not the case. We're having a little technical issue with Zoom, which is great because we can use that time a little bit to talk. So it is an enormous pleasure of mine and both Rico's to be here. We just arrived a couple of hours from New York, and this is going to be rather short but very pleasant trip. And what you just heard was a scherzo, which is a short movement, and that translates as Scherz, a joke from German, by a German composer, Johannes Brahms. And this is from the sonata FAE, which was composed by 3 different composers, and this particular movement was written by Brahms. And the reason why we decided to open with this one piece is because Babadjanian really loved Brahms' music, and it was a big influence on his art as he was a student and eventually as he was a pianist. We are also going to play a selection of pieces by one of his ever favorite composers, and probably yours as well, which is Komitas Vardapet. And in the book, actually, we will discuss the influence of Komitas's legacy on Babadjanian's music, as well as the whole generation of those composers in the Soviets and beyond. So what we're going to play is called Tirani Taj, one of my ever favorite pieces, and I have recorded my first debut album was actually rediscovering the music of Armenia in 2018. It was called The Hidden Treasure, the same name of my project of research. And this particular piece was called a coup de cœur in French, which is like, you know, a little love story. I received so many beautiful messages from the CBC radio listeners, from the listeners from all over the world when they were listening to this particular piece. This is truly dear to my heart. As you may know, Tiranitar translates as the apricot tree, and in this particular piece and song, the narrator addresses the tree and asks the tree not to bear fruit because his sorrow is so deep, he cannot see any flourishing in the world. And in this arrangement for violin by Gabrielian, we can hear some Kamancha sounds, we can hear some depictions of nature, and I hope you enjoy. Tiranitar by Komitas Vardapet. The next piece is probably something you recognize, I hope you will. This is the violin arrangement of Komitases Vagar-Shapati Bash, the dance from Vagar-Shapat. And this is somehow also very, very close to home because Babadjanian himself has a rendition of this particular piece, and it was my sister who was playing this piece when I was a little kid, as you may probably read in the book, and she's actually here, she's right there, and she was playing the Vagar-Shapati dance, Babadjanian's rendition, when I was a little kid, and I completely felt enamored with this particular melody and Babadjanian's music overall. And we also have Khachaturian, Aram Khachaturian, who wrote another piece for piano that is much less virtuosic, в подражании народному, or the imitation to the folk. And Vagar-Shapat was a cultural center in our lost, Armenia, is historical Armenia. And I hope you enjoy. Komitas Vardapet, Vagar-Shapati Pash. I oftentimes joke that Rico is a honorary Armenian because we played so much music, Armenian repertoire together. We're going way back. She's a dear friend, but also a phenomenal pianist that we have been working for the past 10 years together, and we were joking with my sister that we were on the right here and we were listening to Armenian music, and we were joking that by the time she'll arrive to Boston she'll speak Armenian. And she generously agreed to play this wonderful, beautiful piece by Babadjanian that's called Impromptu, and I hope you enjoy Rico Higuma, Babadjanian, Impromptu. repertoire that's written by Babadjanian for violin. We're pretty limited. We have the violin concerto, which I'll talk in a bit about, and we also have the trio, a few quartets, and of course his violin sonata that I recorded on this Hidden Treasure album in 2018. However, there's one particular piece that was very dear to my heart since I was probably a kid, and it is Elegy. That's written in memory of Arno Babadjanian, and that's based on Sayat Nova's folk tune. And every time I would go before, playing on stage, I would listen to that particular piece. It was like my lucky charm. Every time, everywhere in the world. I think I listened to it in the most isolated places of Canada, in the Caribbean islands, before Carnegie Hall, and so on. And at some point, I questioned myself. I'm pretty selfish when it comes to music, and I was like, how come there's no violin arrangement of that? So this summer, I commissioned a violin piano arrangement of Elegy, which was made by a dear friend and fellow member of the Babadjanian International Foundation, Artem Andreasyan, and was a wonderful person, director of Armenian archives, radio archives, Artur Ispiryan. We decided to record this piece. So with Karen Anoyan, who is an amazing pianist, we recorded this particular version for violin and piano of Elegy by Arno Babadjanian. about Armenian classical music, it's impossible to miss this name, Arno Babadjanian, of course, who was the first Armenian to meet the Pope, who was a legendary figure in Soviet music in general, and of course in Soviet Armenian music, who was a figure of mentorship in Babadjanian's life in the beginning of his career. And this is a quite particular piece. I actually teach a course that is about the European music after the Cold War. And I call this piece a piece that's stronger than a Cold War because it became so popular when it came out that 3 American orchestras recorded it. And to the point that it was so globally accepted and celebrated that Newsweek magazine actually offered and suggested to call Aram Khachaturian Person of the Year in 1948. And this is, of course, the saber dance from the ballet Kayane. And I just need to mention that the arrangement I'm playing is of my former violin teacher, Albert Markov, so it's a pretty virtuosic one. If by any chance I will be too affectionate to this microphone, it's because Mark told me to stand by it and not move anywhere, which is quite difficult for me because I'm a walker. I'm a natural walker. But it is truly my pleasure, again, to introduce the research part, the some people may say not so much fun part, but to me it was truly one of the most daring experiences and endeavors that I've taken in my life, in my career, in my professional career, not only as a scholar, but also as a violinist myself. So first of all, I would like to thank Nasser, I'd like to thank Mark, and the Friends of Armenian Cultural Society, Tekian, Boston chapter, and of course the Harvard co-chair for sponsoring this event and for making it possible. It's truly a pleasure because I think that we are on a brink of time in our culture that truly requires our attention to our heritage and to preservation of our heritage. Therefore, the efforts, as as those organizations showed during years and years and years of practice and dedication are truly important, especially right now. So the name of the presentation is Arno Babadjanian, Reviving the Legacy and Reclaiming the Worth. As you know, celebratory as it sounds, I feel that it's really, truly important, and the conversation should start about right now, about his worth and his place in the Armenian culture and in the music culture overall. I hope everybody knows his name here, but in case you didn't, which I really don't think is even possible, Arno Babadjanian was a Soviet Armenian composer and pianist, and on the way here we were just re-listening to his piano playing, and he was a virtuoso pianist, one of the best ones in the Soviets. What's really interesting about his life particularly is that the inception of the Soviet Union was in 1921, 1922. The Sovietization of Armenia happened at the same time as he was born. So he was truly born with the time, with the Soviet time. He was born in the same year. And he received his education both in Yerevan Conservatory and also in Moscow Conservatory. He was quite an ambitious young man who was so fluent in piano playing, who was so virtuosic, because already at the age of 11, he was noticed by critics and the musical surroundings of Yerevan. He was so prolific in his piano playing that when he at first didn't enroll into the Moscow Conservatory from the first try, he got into the Gnesin Music Academy, actually, and Yelena Gnesin, who was the founder of this very esteemed academy, after hearing him say, we're gonna skip 2 years and we're gonna immediately place him on the third year of a bachelor's degree, because his playing was so progressive. So he was not only a very talented composer, but he was also a very virtuosic pianist and truly great musician, intelligent musician. So his early music education happened in Yerevan because his family was very loving of culture and music. His parents played folk instruments, and the music was always as a background and as a celebration in their house. And he remembers, as a little kid, he remembers going to the opera, to the newly opened Yerevan Opera. Now it's a symbol of Armenia, right? Who doesn't go to Yerevan and hangs around the opera house? I mean, this is truly the magnet, the center of and the heart of Yerevan, and I find it truly endearing that the heart of this beautiful city is the musical heart. It's the opera. So Babadjanian used to go a lot to opera with his father, and of course the art of Alexander Spendiaryan influenced him as he was a young boy. In Yerevan, he was also studying with Vartkes Talian, who was then a very well-known teacher, and together with Alexander Arutyunyan and Edward Mirzoyan, he was doing the homework by transcribing the folk tunes of Komitas, by working on the counterpoint of Bach and such. So his education was truly very comprehensive when it came to classical music. And of course, later coming to Moscow Conservatory and graduating from Moscow Conservatory helped tremendously his professional academical level. So when we talk about Babadjanian, he is mostly well known for his songs, and we'll talk about that just in a second. But in the book as well, I really want to urge and reinforce and emphasize the absolute richness of his classical heritage and legacy. So as I already mentioned, he was born at the same time, almost at the brink of the new times, very interesting times, 70 years of very interesting times, let's call it that. So in 1921, the Sovietization of Armenia happened, and this is actually the symbol of Armenia, because every single republic of Soviet Union received a new symbol, and this was Armenian. When we discuss the Soviet time, whether we're talking about Sima or Frolova Walker, we can really go in depth about the nature of the Soviets and whether or not it's an evil time. It was definitely not the most joyful periods. But this time definitely gave a lot of openings to new institutions and to the republics that oftentimes didn't have a classical music tradition, and Armenia was not an exception in that regard. Georgia, for example, already had quite rich musical academical tradition. However, Armenia really benefited in a lot of ways from the Sovietization because new institutions were opened, such as the Laboratory of Folk Instruments of Nuné Melikian, and it was truly special for me to present my book at one of the venues for Nuné Melikian College, because it's one of the oldest music institutions existing. So, of course, Babadjanian was living in a very interesting reviving of culture time during that period. The Soviets also arranged a lot of cultural exchanges. For example, they would send some teachers from Russia, or they would send them to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and the cultural exchange was definitely very beneficial for both sides, and Armenia is not an exception as well. And when it came to the music that was composed or the overall arts, of course, at that point, the nationalization of Armenia was not necessarily the most important point. The image of the worker, пролетариат всех стран, соединяйтесь, the image of the social person became the main goal of the Soviets, and that of course influenced the music and the arts, such as writing and even theater, that was happening during those times. There was always, an award system that was existing during the Soviets, and they were controlling the state of arts via different mediums, and one of them was, of course, the Stalin Prize, and I call it the Soviet Grammys. It's something that everybody wanted to have, because winning a Stalin Prize, especially of the first degree, was monetarily very, very beneficial. It was around 100,000 rubles, and usually the first degree would be awarded to the composers of non-ethnical origins, so that probably come from Moscow, from Russia, and of course Aram Khachaturian was actually a winner of the first degree prize. So Stalin Prize was a beautiful machine, well-oiled machine to control and to encourage a certain image of the art and certain narrative in the music. There were also the second degree that was mainly given to the ethnic composers, and one of the injustices that I found when I was doing my research is that in the big, amazing labor of Frolova worker on Stalin Prize, she doesn't mention Babadjanian's name, and Babadjanian received the Stalin Prize of the second degree for his heroic ballad, which was a jumpstart for his career in the musical circles of that time. Soviets also made sure that they created the state-sponsored journals and newspapers that would make sure that the ideals of the Soviets were truly imprinted into the Soviet people's minds. And in every single republic, similar to East Germany, actually, in every single republic there would be the Composers' Union opened, Дома композиторов, that would supervise every single new piece written during that time. And God forbid you would not be in their favor. That would be your work would be banned, criticized, and probably taken out of the production. So, as we already know, such motto as «Пролетариат всех стран, соединяйтесь», which means, the working class of all the countries get united. And also the second motto, the biggest motto, was «Дружба народов», the friendship of nations, and that really emerged and was really emphasized during that time. And therefore, all the composers of the ethnic origins were encouraged, if not forced, to write the music that would derive their roots from the ethnic folk music. And in that regard we didn't have any problems. Armenia has rich folk traditions, so does Georgia. And actually derivation from that was frowned upon and punished. So in a lot of ways, the ethnic composers were almost cornered and pigeonholed into writing a certain type of music and not being too keen to have avant-garde styles or to explore new expressions that were happening during that time in the West, for example. And of course, the folk music was tailored to the needs of Stalin and to the needs of the socialism. So anything that was religious was erased because, as we know, the Soviets were anti-Christian, they were anti-religion, agnostic, atheist. So any type of church music was banned, any type of reference to religious music was also banned. When it comes to Babadjanian, and here we will just mainly have sort of discussion, it's very interesting where he stands in the landscape of Armenian music, landscape of Soviet music. And during the book launches, luckily we already had quite a few. There were beautiful discussions in regards to where does he belong? Is he Soviet? Is he Armenian? What exactly is his influence? These actually are all from the book, and I need to mention that I'm so lucky and so honored to be working and to be the North American representative of Arno Babadjanian Foundation, and they gave me exclusive rights to the archives, to the archival pictures of Babadjanian, and these are all available in my book, and I was able to unearth all of these beautiful images that were maybe never seen before, definitely not known to the Western audience. So here we have Babadjanian playing with Silantiev, who was one of the biggest conductors. I think he was playing, he was playing the heroic ballet here. Here we see him with Shostakovich. With him, he had a quite interesting and special relationship. He dedicated his violin sonata to Shostakovich, violin sonata that was very, very, very criticized by the Soviet Composers Union. And Shostakovich actually called to Babadjanian later that day and said, I know they criticized your work, but I really liked it. And Babadjanian, who was very, enamored with Shostakovich, who was very touched by his support, he dedicated the violin sonata in 1958 to Shostakovich, and it is written in Shostakovich style. It's one of the most beautiful, gorgeous pieces. I had, pleasure to perform. I performed it at Carnegie Hall. I recorded it, and even the composers of other origins were truly inspired by this work, and it really sparked a lot of musical interactions with the Western audiences in my particular career. And of course, we couldn't, miss the profile of Aram Khachaturian, with whom, as I already mentioned, Babadjanian had very interesting, long-lasting relationship. First as a little kid who was discovered by Khachaturian, who was mentored by Khachaturian, and later in his life who was even criticized by Khachaturian for switching to more light-hearted music, let's call it this way. Babadjanian led a very interesting life. And here we just have a few glimpses of his compositional and pianistic performance life. He was working together with Rostropovich, Mstislav Rostropovich, the cellist, the legendary Soviet cellist. You maybe know him by the video of Rostropovich playing where the Berlin Wall was demounted, and Rostropovich was playing Bach there. So together they were actually living in Moscow in the same building, and they were working on the cello concerto. And I just got recently contacted by friends of Ara Babadjanian, who is Babadjanian's son, and his cello concerto was finally premiered in America, I think 2 weeks ago in Huntington, California. Down from Mstislav Rostropovich below, we see William Saroyan, who was a great buddy of Babadjanian. They really liked to hang around, and from what I'm understanding, they really had wonderful time. There are a lot of pictures of them drinking wine, and this is actually the picture from his Moscow flat when Saroyan was visiting Moscow, and they immediately immediately found a lot of common interests, and later on they were seeing each other in Paris, in Armenia. They were truly good friends. And there is this interesting story about William Saroyan writing an article about 3 great Armenians, and in this article he included Aram Khachaturian, Martiros Saryan, who is our famous painter, and Arno Babadjanian. And apparently Arno Babadjanian was really searching for that particular article later on in his life, as he was criticized by the Soviet government and Soviet Composers Union, by his contemporaries. He was hoping that if he would show this article to people, people would actually take his music more seriously, and he would say, "You see, I'm this guy said I'm a great Armenian." But unfortunately, as much as I tried, and I've truly put a lot of effort into finding this article, because this article was written actually in Paris, and since I speak French, I really tried my best to find and unearth this article. This article was never found, but it was indeed written, and Babadjanian was very proud of it and to be included among pretty much, the greatest Armenians out there. In the group pictures, we see Dilijan with Benjamin Britten, who was a huge fan of Six Pictures and who visited Armenia and Dilijan in the 1960s, and there are also beautiful stories about his trip. In the book, I have a mini chapter dedicated to Benjamin Britten and his relationship with Babadjanian, and their little anecdotes. Peter Pierce, who was Benjamin Britten's partner, also wrote diaries, and I found some very fascinating entries about his trip to Armenia and his attitude towards Armenian music, and his complete love for Babadjanian's work and Babadjanian's playing. And down below we see a bunch of wonderful Armenian composers, and for example, the far left, this is Martin Vartezaryan, whom I had a pleasure to interview for the documentary I made about Arno Babadjanian a few years ago, whom I just saw recently in December as well. I told him about the book. And these are all great Armenian composers: Edward Mirzoyan, Hazaros Saryan, who was the son of Martiros Saryan. So Babadjanian was very well versed as a musician, and his classical compositions, even though they're not that many, were always very notable. And from the 60s on, he switched to popular music, something that was definitely more profitable, something where he felt much more comfortable in terms of less harsh criticism. The response was much more quicker. Of course, the feedback was immediate. The songs of Babadjanian were translated to more than 10 different languages. I found some in Polish language, in Brazilian, by Brazilian interpreters and performers. Mireille Mathieu, who is one of the most legendary female singers of France, she also sang Babadjanian's song, Je suis là, that was sang by Anna German in the Soviet Russia. And I just recently discovered that Carlos Santana also used Babadjanian's melody in his track that's called Europe. So Babadjanian's influence in terms of his non-classical compositions was as big as his classical, if not much bigger. And he truly enjoyed the fame as the best popular music writer, but it almost feels forced, that he was forced into that genre because he was unable to continue his piano virtuoso career because of his lymphoblastoma and his cancerous illness that didn't allow him to continue playing because he had a lot of pain, and B, because there was a lack of encouragement for his classical compositions from the Soviets. For example, when he wrote his violin concerto, which, by the way, has never been played in the full orchestration in the United States, and as of right now, we're working literally 2 days ago, we had a meeting, and we're working on performing this composition here in New York and potentially in other cities of America. But when he wrote it, it was, his student work, of course, but he was harshly criticized for imitating Khachaturian's concerto. And you don't even have to be a professional musician to hear that these are completely two different pieces. But I think Armenians were feeling that we already have a violin concerto, let's not have another one, okay? We're good. So, of course, when you're a young student and when you want to discover or you want to write more, especially in the beginning of the career, encouragement could be helpful. So Babadjanian definitely did not receive that, and therefore some of his derivation to the popular music, to the film music, could be forced by that and not necessarily completely voluntary. So when it came to his place afterlife, his legacy, we may know the story that Edward Mirzoyan, who was a long time had president of the Composers Union and a very good friend of Babadjanian, with whom they traveled all over the world, played all over the world, were childhood friends, was viciously fighting for Babadjanian to be buried in the Pantheon, was rejected because, as they were saying, Babadjanian didn't write symphonies, therefore he cannot be considered a great Armenian composer. So he did not write state-aligned works. He did not necessarily write works that would praise socialism and the image of worker. Therefore, his fame as the composer of big classical forms definitely faded. He is widely recognized until now. Even nowadays, his songs are being sang in modern Russia. I grew up with his songs, even though I did not grow up in the Soviets. And his place as the chansonnier, I would say, is definitely untouched and unmatched. So when I was starting to work on him, I realized that there's really missing points and there's lacuna of comprehensive materials about him, especially about his classical works, and I truly wanted to change it. This is me relieved at my doctorate graduation at McGill. I was thinking recently about my dedication to Babadjanian, and I thought that, as I already mentioned, since my very early childhood, I was encountering music of Babadjanian, and I thought about it, and I thought that Babadjanian really shaped me as a person, as a violinist, in a lot of ways. So no matter how hard the work would get, it was never a chore. To me, it was always like a homecoming. That's why I never felt that it was really difficult. I started playing his music when I was 19 at the University of Montreal, and after we actually played the Babadjanian's trio, that was my remedy for homesickness, because I was completely alone. I immigrated by myself. I started creating concerts of Armenian music, Western and Armenian music, and at first I was calling it La Fusion Musicale. Eventually it got the name of Hidden Treasure, and this is me, 20-something, fresh of hopes and dreams, in 2012, creating one of the first concerts of the Hidden Treasure at one of the churches in Montreal. And actually with this particular pianist, we toured all over Canada, we actually toured all over the world, and this is one of the last touring pictures of ours. It was 2018. It was in Toronto, Four Seasons Hall, and we just finished our tour that was dedicated to the Armenian music. And with him, with Michel Saint-Brocard, we traveled to the most isolated places of the country, to the places that you cannot get any transportation but the boat. So we would actually be in our car, get in the boat. I was scared to death. I was like, why am I doing this again? But we played Armenian music and the music of Babadjanian to different audiences, and always to a great acclaim. So I don't necessarily like to talk a lot about me when it comes to Babadjanian, because it's truly something that I'm doing out of huge admiration and respect for his figure, and because I truly feel that he deserves a better place in the musical history. But I started, as I already mentioned, I started with the Hidden Treasure album. That was my debut album, and that was widely recognized and acclaimed in both North America and abroad. I then created the first documentary, self-funded documentary, short documentary, but in English, about Arno Babadjanian, where I was able to interview his contemporaries and colleagues, and that was truly special. Trip was very short. I only had 7 days, but we somehow were able to finish the project. Of course, as a violinist, because I first started being fascinated by him as an interpreter. I played many performances of his music worldwide, given a lot of lectures from the little kids to university levels and 4 different languages about Babadjanian. So I wrote the first comprehensive and sort of, giving the biography and musical analysis of some of his pieces in English in 2019. That was my first comprehensive dissertation at McGill. And that exact year, because Arno Babadjanian, who is the composer's son, heard about my efforts, he appointed me as a North American representative of the International Foundation. So when it comes to the book that was just published in December, I am very truly proud of this work, because I finally feel that this is something that people can refer to when it comes to correct information about Babadjanian, if I may say so. Because when I worked on his on the dissertation about him, I realized that there's a lot of controversial information, and oftentimes the sources would say opposite dates, opposite information. So I really had to dig into deeper a little bit to make sure that the book features the most up-to-date, the most accurate, meticulously researched information. It also is written for a Western audience. Therefore, I thought that to give the brief history of Armenian music and culture was necessary. Of course, the exploration of Armenian and Soviet paradigms and musical schools of thought, different performers of that time. I, of course, included some anecdotes, personal stories, personal touch of his composer colleagues, his performer colleagues, his son, his relatives, and my own story. I really tried to thread in my own personal touch in regards to his place in my life and how he touched my life. And as I already mentioned, there are the exclusive pictures from the archives, and this summer we actually finished. We really worked hard to get the full list of his works, so nothing is ever lost. So this is a very interesting encounter that I was trying to get for 3 years. This is James Digg, who was a pianist at the Tchaikovsky competition, and that year Babadjanian's piece was a compulsory piece, and James Digg liked his music so much, he later on contacted him and tried to bring him to America. And the first time he was refused, thank you, the Soviet bureaucracy, but the second time he actually succeeded. And 3 years I was trying to find this man, and I remember the time when I heard his voice. I was like, I can't believe, because to me, he's a legendary person. He brought Babadjanian to the United States. Babadjanian became a honorary citizen of Texas and Ohio states. Is there something? No? The microphone? No? Everything's fine? I thought there was something about microphone. This is the most stressful part of this presentation for me. And when we were having the book launch in Armenia, Mr. Digg very generously gave us the video testimonial about the book, because he read the book and he himself was very touched that this book, of course, first of all mentions him, because I interviewed him, and was published. And as we speak about the horizons, this is the end part of the presentation. There's a lot still to be done. So we do have a series of book signing events in particular, we're probably going to be in Columbia University, in University of Michigan next semester. Season, this is a performer saying, semester, a scholar. Next semester, and some others in California. We just had a quite successful presentation at Stanford University. So I'm really looking forward to broadening a little bit the academical influence of Babadjanian. We will also have concerts dedicated to the 105th anniversary of Babadjanian, because the 100th anniversary of Babadjanian felt very undermined by COVID, and we were not able to create anything. So we are right now working to create a tour of his concerts. I'm actually hoping to get my ticket to Armenia tonight because we are working on the Armenian translation of the book and also the French translation of the book. So we can, again, broaden the audience of Babadjanian admirers. We're also hoping to create an audiobook. By the way, I need to mention that New Mag magazine was one of the most beautiful publishing houses that I came across, and I'm truly very happy to work with them. So we are working on those projects. And these books right now are also available on Amazon, and the original copies are available on my website, and they're available for your purchase tonight. So I truly hope that with those efforts, this not will only be a one instance of celebrating our legacy, but it will perhaps encourage younger generation of scholars and performers to protect and to cherish our beautiful heritage. Thank you very much.
Of course, if you have any questions, I know Nuné would be very happy to answer them. And if I may, I would like to compliment you on the exemplary use of the microphone. I mean, seriously, because sometimes people speak into the microphone. No, I guess the instructions came through loud and clear. So thank you so very much. And for those of you on Zoom, if you have questions, please send them in. And for those of you who are on Zoom who may have had problems with the sound at any point, fear not, all is well, and the recording will be on YouTube perfectly and tonight, and there will be no problems whatsoever. So please, if you have a question in the room, if I may ask, follow the lead of Tanya and come up to the microphone, because otherwise you will not be heard by others online or in the room.
Hi, Tanya Bartevian, also a musician, and congratulations, Nuné and Biko, also, both on your performance and on your presentation. I was intrigued about what you said about Soviet composers who have an ethnic background being encouraged or forced to write with those themes or tunes in mind. Whereas I am assuming that did not apply to people who were like Prokofiev or Shostakovich or something, right? Is that right? So my question is, would that then automatically sort of put the so-called ethnic composers in a lesser status, not only in the Soviet Union, but also in Europe? So it would cause a problem that way, be taken for granted, like, oh, they just write folk music. So they were in a sense forced to be of lower status. Is that right? Yes. Is that right?
This is actually a very beautiful thought. I haven't even thought of this, and this is such a deep thought that you introduced. First of all, I need to say that Russian composers, where they were speaking especially about Prokofiev, as you know, he really had a very tumultuous relationship with the Soviets, and he died, interestingly. So Prokofiev absolutely hated Stalin because Stalin got his wife incarcerated. He completely broke his life, and if we talk about the regime, and if we're talking about the ramifications of not necessarily following the guidelines. Prokofiev wrote the Romeo and Juliet ballet that took him 5 years. The choreographers of that work were assassinated by the state for being formalist. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful pieces ever written, and it was a very difficult one for Prokofiev to actually manage. And for example, when it comes to they were not maybe necessarily forced to write the ethnic music, but they were forced to write something that falls within the Soviet lines, because Prokofiev, since you just mentioned his name, he's also happened to be one of my favorite composers. He wrote the Romeo and Juliet with happy ending because he thought that the ballet will be more appropriate with a happy ending, and then the Soviets actually forced him to have a bad ending. Like, they were like, no, they need to die because we're in the Soviets. Nobody's happy in here. So, and if we talk about Zhdanov decree, 1948, if we talk about the resolution of 1938 that, impacted the lives of Khachaturian, it was not a Zhdanov degree, and then Shostakovich. They had their own problems, not necessarily the ethnic music ones. But this is very, very, very insightful comment that you said. Yeah, I do think that writing the ethnic music definitely closed off the prospects and the perspectives for the ethnic composers, and we can see that by Khachaturian, who wrote his first symphony and got his Stalin Prize for that and was praised. And then when he wrote his third symphony poem, he was immediately shut down because it was more avant-garde and a little bit more westernized. So I think definitely that limited the possibilities for the ethnic composers. And thank you. This is a beautiful question.
Ladies first.
First, I would like to congratulate you
Thank you.
for this very serious work. We owe you so much.
Thank you.
I have two questions. Could you tell us a little bit about the Arno Babadjanian Foundation, what they do? And also, are you thinking about a Russian translation of your work?
This is a very common question. So I'll start with the second one, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So my main goal was to introduce Arno Babadjanian to not only diasporan members, but members outside of the diaspora. So my main goal was English. I do think that there is enough wonderful works. Susanna Montuni wrote a beautiful work. Anna Grigoryan wrote a work about him. So we also have, Mikhail Taragonyan's work on Babadjanian. So there is no lacuna of comprehensive works about Babadjanian. Maybe they're not necessarily super, full, but they exist. So the Russian reader has the access to Babadjanian, whereas the Americans, the Canadians, the English speakers all over the world don't. So we, of course, want to create also a French translation, which would, again, broaden the audience. So it's not to be political, but just Russia right now is not in the center of my interest, simply because he is well recognized in Russia. I really want him to be more recognized abroad. Yeah. And as of the International Foundation, it was founded in 1990, and it was actually a couple of friends that adored Babadjanian's legacy, and they decided to sponsor and create this foundation. And Arno Babadjanian, who is the president, he also endorsed the book, and the first thing that you'll read will actually be his foreword in the book. We are working relentlessly to promote and they are organizing a lot of concerts within Russia and Georgia of music of Babadjanian, and even though it is quite symbolic role for me, I'm doing my best in here, but it also has different chapters all over the world, in Europe as well, in Belgium and Germany, and our main goal is to again promote and advocate the legacy of Babadjanian.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for today's event, for all those who helped to make it a success. I have a question which kind of a lead from the first question that was raised. Do you intend to include his visit to London? You said you have something about his visit in USA. Probably you can contact Loris Tiknavorian in that respect. Because I was there. I brought him from the airport to the hotel, and we had some serious discussion. And touching.
Where have you been? all these years.
So I have a lot of things that I can mention, but some of them I have to censor. Especially when it comes to women, sorry.
Yes, he was quite a charmer.
I mean, based on what you were commenting regarding his tendency towards popular jazz, whatever you call it, as well as the classical, they said, why do you do both? Now, this doesn't match my ethical principles, but I'm just going to say what he said. He said, classical music is my wife. The light music, popular music, is my girlfriend.
Yes. Well, actually, if you would like to leave some of your contacts, we'll be happy if we can include that in the French version. We can definitely include that in the French version.
But the most important thing, which was kind of a lead conclusion or continuation of the first question about ethnicity and so on, we touched on that subject, especially the censorship of his artwork and so on. And I said, our culture has been our weapon throughout history because we were denied weapon, although we always sang. And he said, yes, you're right. And I said, I qualify your music as a mardunak mishaguiti ardahaydutun. So I don't know how to say that in English. Maybe it doesn't sound good. It's an expression of a fighting culture, a culture that keeps on us surviving and spearheads other artistic creation. And he said, yes, you are right. I'm afraid to say that to anybody, but I'm going to continue on with that spirit, even in my love songs. So I don't know where you can take that from.
No, I just want to, mention when it comes to, protecting your culture and maybe fighting, I need just to mention it's a very interesting instance of Aram Khachaturian, for example, who actually, Babadjanian and Arutinian, they were both in the competition to create the Soviet Armenian anthem, and they were finalists, and then Khachaturian came, and of course, the lore was given to Khachaturian, and he wrote the anthem. But many musicians and musicologists smile when they listen to that, because in that melody of the Soviet Armenian anthem that everybody was listening every single morning, he put the melodies of Padarak, right? And he based it on the Padarak, and Soviet people didn't even know that. So, there were ways, to fight a little bit the censorship and the ethnicity. But again, Babadjanian just chose to write the music that would be purely Armenian when it came to classical. Whereas, other composers such as Kabalevsky, such as Khachaturian himself, they would write the music that would be based on other ethnicities, folk music. So I think in that regard, as he said, no matter where I live, I will always have an Armenian accent. I really like this citation and quote by Babadjanian. And I think that also limited him a little bit in terms of recognition, union-wide and worldwide. Him being truly patriotic and staying Armenian to the core and stubborn and charming, as you mentioned. So yeah, that would be the comment I would have.
Okay. One last question, a very quick one. I know you said you're gearing your work towards the Western world. How about gearing it towards China or beyond the Western world?
I already don't sleep a lot, so please don't give me ideas. Don't give me ideas.
Thank you.
But this is a good thought. Thank you.
Question from online, and this is maybe also related to Tanya's question. Why do you think Babadjanian's classical works are not frequently performed in the Western world by leading orchestras?
Rico, why? Because they're hard. They're actually, so Babadjanian, everything that Babadjanian wrote in terms of piano music, and my sister could attest to that, Rico could attest to that, are highly, highly difficult technically. So he himself was quite well-versed, as I already said, so this is one of the reasons. Second reason, interestingly, I spoke to the owner, the manager of the acquiring manager of the Juilliard bookstore, and he said, interesting, I heard his name, but I've never seen his music. We definitely have the lacuna of actual written printed music. And one of the things that the foundation is working right now is the full edition of all of his works, because we simply don't have it. As we were talking right now about performing his violin concerto, the first question the conductor, a very well known conductor in New York area, asked me, was the orchestration, can I see the music? And when it comes to Babadjanian music, it was truly in a dire condition for quite some years. And I think the lacuna and the lack of access to the music, just to the music sheet. As of recordings, actually, they're getting more and more. And I honestly can say that within this 10-year span of my research and my performance career in Canada, I've seen a very, very striking interest sparked in Canadian and American performance. So his music is actually getting performed. We were just discussing with Rico, Charles Richard Hamlan, who was playing Babadjanian's Impromptu on the Chopin competition. He chose it as a piece, and that was a beautiful choice. So no, I would say, and so did Arno Babadjanian, our very good pianist, with whom I had a pleasure to actually perform Babadjanian Sonata. He chose to play Babadjanian's, I think, 6 pictures, if I'm not mistaken, or poem. I may be wrong, but he chose to play it on Balklibern competition. He could have chosen any other piece, but he chose to play Babadjanian, and he was one of the prize winners, finalist of that competition. So I'd say that, yes, definitely it's both the responsibility of performers and the responsibility of Armenian government, who's unfortunately very deaf when it comes to legacy of Babadjanian. They're just not active at all. They pretend they don't understand what we're talking about, and we're trying to really work with Armenian government to perhaps make it more governmentally sustained and governmentally sponsored and supported when it comes to publishing his works.
Thank you very much for your beautiful performance, and I'm very excited to read your book. I took some glances of it. I did purchase it, and you have a lot of information that's very special. So I encourage everybody to buy the book. I think it's really
She's
quite
not
an
hired by me. Thank you, I appreciate it.
My doctoral dissertation was on the 4 pieces and the 6 pictures by Arno Babadjanian at Indiana University. And so my dissertation is in 1986. And
Bravo.
I want to say how excited I was to study these pieces. I met Arno Babadjanian in 1978. There was a week-long conference on Armenian music that was fantastic. And Arno Babadjanian was intended to be the chairperson of that, the honorary chairperson, and he passed away, and Arno Babadjanian replaced him. And he was there for a whole week, and I couldn't believe my good fortune to be there and hear him play. There was a piano, and he was like a honey, and his piano was like honey, and we were like bees gathering around. It was. I heard him play his own compositions, and Chopin and Beethoven and Rachmaninoff. And one time he finished a Chopin piece, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, this music touches me so much. I feel like I've written it myself." That's much how much it was part of him. But what impressed me and encouraged me to pursue a study of his music was that I thought he was very courageous. I thought he was very creative, and I thought he was very adventuresome, because all of his pieces were in different styles. Some of them were romantic for piano, some of them were dissonant.
Yeah, some of them were 12-tone.
Some of them were
12-tone.
The 6 pictures is very complex. And I'm hoping that as a result of your book, that more people will be interested in his music. And I do think that not having access to the score is part of the problem, of not having more performances of his pieces. But he was indeed a great pianist. And I had an opportunity to, in London, I interviewed him in a taxi cab. We were driving to Steinway's in London, and we were escorted to the top floor of Steinway Piano Company in London. And I played for him, and he played for me.
I feel like everybody was in London.
It was.
I didn't get the memo.
It was really an extraordinary opportunity. You can imagine, as a doctoral student,
of course,
embarking on writing about his pieces, and and having him make corrections. He said, "Well, there's a mistake in that page," so he would mark it. So I congratulate
Thank you
you
so
for
much.
bringing
Thank you for your
attention to a great pianist and a great composer, great
you so
Armenian
much.
composer.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you. I just want to mention, you mentioned the London trip, and in speaking about him as a pianist, when he was in London actually performing, there was this concert. I don't remember the name right now of the pianist, unfortunately, but it's in the book. And he complained that the piano was not in a good state, and he was like, "No, I can't play this, not a single note." And then Babadjanian comes in, and piano sounds absolutely lavishly beautiful. So yes, he was truly like a honey to the piano. He was a wonderful pianist
Great.
with no limitations.
Thank
And
you.
there's a suggestion from online to have one of Babadjanian's pieces played at the Armenian Night at Symphony. It has been duly passed along to our friends at FAX, who will execute on it.
You may know a violinist. No, but truly, thank you so much for your questions. If you would like to keep in touch, please, I encourage you, if you have any memories. Again, this is an ongoing work on Babadjanian, hopefully not the last one. I truly hope that it will just start the conversations. We have the vision, and hopefully we'll be able to fulfill. So if you have any suggestions, ideas, please contact me, or I'm sure that if you contact Mark, he will pass it along. And thank you. We're absolutely amazing audience.
Thank you, Nuné, and also Rico for your wonderful playing. And Miriam did my job for me. Go buy the book. It's for sale out there in the solarium, and she will sign copies, and there are refreshments. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. See you very soon in person or online.